Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I want to talk about an issue that's not just about economics or politics, but about the foundational elements of freedom itself. We live in an era of growing uncertainty, economically, politically, and socially. In the face of these challenges, many people seek solutions through various forms of state intervention, sometimes even advocating for the government to take full control of key aspects of our lives, especially in economic matters. But what if I told you that this road to central control doesn't lead to the security or equality we're often promised? What if instead it leads to the erosion of the very freedoms we value? This path, once started, can be hard to stop, and it can ultimately lead to a society that is far less free and far less humane than what we set out to create. Today, we're going to explore the dangers of central economic planning, the loss of individual freedom, and the societal consequences that follow. I'm going to walk you through some important arguments that highlight why centralized control, while often appearing beneficial in theory, has severe and lasting consequences in practice. Imagine a system where the state has control over nearly every aspect of economic life. It decides what goods should be produced, how resources are allocated, and even what prices should be set. The proponents of such central planning believe that by concentrating decision-making power in the hands of a few, we can eliminate inefficiencies, reduce inequalities, and ensure that everyone has what they need. On the surface, this seems like a noble idea, right? After all, who wouldn't want a system where poverty is eradicated and resources are distributed more evenly? But the reality is that central planning is not only inefficient, it is inherently incompatible with individual freedom. The first major issue with central planning is the assumption that a small group of planners can possess enough knowledge to manage the complexities of an entire economy. Let's think about that for a moment. The economy is made up of millions, sometimes billions, of individual decisions. Each person makes choices about what they want to buy, what they want to produce, and how they want to allocate their resources based on their unique preferences, needs, and knowledge of local conditions. Planners, no matter how well-intentioned, simply cannot gather or process all the information necessary to manage these decisions effectively. What might seem like a minor detail to a planner could be of critical importance to an individual or a business. When decision-making is centralized, individual preferences and local knowledge are disregarded in favor of a one-size-fits-all solution imposed from above. As a result, central planning leads to inefficiency, not because the planners aren't trying hard enough, but because they lack the ability to make informed decisions for everyone. Instead of coordinating with the real needs and wants of individuals, the planners must rely on abstract theories, broad data sets, and generalized policies that rarely capture the nuances of a complex and dynamic society. Now, let's talk about how this loss of economic freedom impacts personal freedom. When the government takes control of economic life, it's not just controlling the allocation of resources. It's controlling your options, your opportunities, and your future. In a free market system, individuals make decisions based on their own preferences. They choose what products to buy, what services to use, and where to spend their money. They have the freedom to pursue different careers, to invest in their own education, and to save for their futures. But in a centrally planned economy, these decisions are made by someone else, by the planners. When the state controls the economy, it also controls the avenues through which you can improve your own situation. If the government decides how much of a certain resource you can have or what job opportunities are available, you lose the freedom to shape your own destiny. Economic freedom is intertwined with personal freedom, and when one is restricted, so is the other. The effect is profound. You're no longer in control of your life. You're dependent on the state, not only for your income, but for your livelihood. The system may promise security, but what it delivers is dependence. And that dependence can easily become a tool for coercion. When a government controls resources, it has the power to reward or punish its citizens. Those who comply with the system may be given more privileges or access to better goods and services, while those who resist or question the system may find themselves marginalized. The promise of security transforms into a system of control, where your choices are dictated by what the state deems appropriate or necessary. This gradual erosion of freedom can be hard to notice at first. It often starts with small steps, perhaps the regulation of a specific industry, or the introduction of new laws designed to protect the public. But over time, these controls expand until the state's grip on the economy becomes absolute. And by that point, it's too late to reverse course. One of the most concerning consequences of central economic planning is the way it undermines democracy. In a democratic society, power is distributed among many different actors. Political parties, the judiciary, the media, and civil society all play a role in holding government accountable and ensuring that it acts in the public interest. But in a centrally planned system, power becomes concentrated in the hands of a few. The planners who control the economy also hold significant political power. They must enforce their vision for society and ensure that their plans are carried out. And as we've already discussed, when people resist or when things don't go according to plan, the planners must resort to coercion. This concentration of power is dangerous. It erodes the checks and balances that are so essential to a functioning democracy. When economic control is centralized, political power tends to follow suit. Over time, this leads to the establishment of an authoritarian regime where dissent is suppressed and alternative viewpoints are not tolerated. Once democracy has been eroded, it's nearly impossible to restore it. The planners, who now hold all the power, have a vested interest in maintaining their control. They will suppress opposition, manipulate public opinion, and rewrite laws to ensure that their authority is not challenged. This is why central planning often leads to totalitarianism, the concentration of all power in the hands of a single group or individual. But even before we reach the point of totalitarianism, the damage to democracy is clear. When the state controls economic life, citizens lose their voice in how society is run. They become subjects rather than participants in the political process. And when the people no longer have a say in how resources are distributed or how decisions are made, they lose their ability to hold the government accountable. In any free society, the rule of law is paramount. Laws provide the structure within which individuals can plan their lives and make decisions. They ensure that everyone is subject to the same rules and that those rules are predictable and consistent. This allows people to trust that their rights will be respected and that they can go about their business without fear of arbitrary interference from the government. But under central planning, the rule of law is gradually replaced by the rule of men, by the arbitrary decisions of those in power. In a centrally planned economy, laws must constantly change to accommodate the shifting needs of the plan. What was legal yesterday may be illegal today because the government has decided that the priorities of the plan have shifted. This lack of consistency erodes trust in the legal system. When laws are constantly changing, people can no longer rely on them to protect their rights. Instead, they must navigate an unpredictable and ever-changing set of rules that are designed to serve the interests of the planners, rather than the people. Moreover, the rule of law is undermined by the necessity of enforcing the plan. In order to ensure compliance, the government must grant itself extraordinary powers to monitor and control the actions of its citizens. This leads to a system where laws are not applied equally to everyone, but are instead enforced selectively to maintain control over the population. When the rule of law is replaced by the rule of men, society becomes less free. People are subject to the whims of those in power, and their rights are no longer protected by an impartial legal system. This is yet another way in which central planning undermines the very foundations of a free society. One of the most troubling consequences of central planning is that it tends to elevate the worst kinds of people to positions of power. In a free society, people rise to prominence based on their ability to create value, to innovate, and to provide goods and services that others want. But in a centrally planned economy, the criteria for success are entirely different. When power is concentrated in the hands of a few, those who are willing to do whatever it takes to maintain control are the ones who succeed. The planners must make difficult and often ruthless decisions about how resources are allocated and who benefits from the system. And those who are willing to make these decisions without regard for the well-being of others are the ones who rise to the top. Over time, the system becomes dominated by individuals who are more interested in maintaining their own power than in serving the public good. This is why, historically, Authoritarian regimes that rely on central planning often end up being led by individuals who are corrupt, ruthless, and willing to suppress dissent at any cost. In contrast, a free market rewards those who provide value to others. Success in such a system is based on merit, not on connections or political maneuvering. But in a centrally planned economy, success is determined by one's loyalty to the regime and one's willingness to follow orders without question. One of the main promises of central planning is security. Proponents of central planning argue that the state can provide a level of security that the free market cannot. By controlling the economy, they argue, the government can ensure that everyone has access to the basic necessities of life: food, shelter, healthcare, and education. But this promise of security is often illusory. In practice, central planning leads to shortages, inefficiencies, and ultimately insecurity. When the government controls the distribution of resources, those resources are often misallocated. Goods that are in high demand may not be produced in sufficient quantities, while goods that are not needed may be overproduced. Rationing becomes necessary to manage these shortages, and people are forced to wait in long lines for basic goods and services. The result is a system where everyone has less, and the promise of security is replaced by the reality of scarcity. What's worse, in a centrally planned system, there is little room for individual initiative. People are no longer free to work harder or to innovate in order to improve their own situation. Instead, they are forced to rely on the state for their livelihood, and this reliance creates a false sense of security. In reality, people become more vulnerable because they have less control over their own lives. The path to central planning is paved with good intentions, but it leads to the erosion of individual freedom, the destruction of democracy, and the rise of authoritarianism. This is not a path we should take lightly. In order to preserve our freedom, we must resist the temptation to turn to central planning as a solution to our problems. Instead, we must embrace the principles of individual liberty, personal responsibility, and free markets. Only by doing so can we ensure that our society remains free, prosperous, and humane. Thank you for watching. If you found this discussion insightful, please share it with others, and let's continue this important conversation in the comments below.